Welcome to the Elokus podcast. This is class number 18. In the second discourse, Oteh Kasalma, which is the second discourse of the great Maamor B'Shasha Hegdimu, 5672. Again, this is class number 18, which would make it, 38th class in the entire series. So we are holding over here in the end of chapter 7. I thought we'd finish it yesterday, but we still got a little bit more to go. And here we are. So in yesterday's class, we discussed the difference between what's called aroch, what means that it has some kind of a value, usually when you have cause and effect, which is an evolution, like a chain-like evolution, like we discussed in yesterday's class. That's when there is erech, there is value. And ein aroch is when one thing comes from the other, but they don't. It doesn't. The source, and we're calling it source just because it produces it, not because it. Generally, the idea of a source is where one thing can be found within it. Over here, the Ein Sof, the infinite one, doesn't contain any of the features and characteristics and definitions and personality traits that there is in the spheros and the attributes. And therefore it's called Ein Aroch because it has to the source, what it produces is absolutely nothing. It doesn't have even one iota of itself in it. Okay? So then the question is, this is where we're holding the Inyan Ein Aroch L'cha Ba'olam Hazeh. According to this idea, what comes out? That the entire concept of worlds, all worlds, starting from Atzilus and down, are all Ein Aroch L'cha, are all valueless and utterly insignificant to the Ein Sof, to the infinite one, to God Himself. So then why do we say in the prayer, Ein aroch l'cha ba'olam hazeh, that there's nothing to compare to you in this world, when really there is nothing to compare to you even in, and when we say to compare, we mean anything of value, anything of significance, even in the upper world, even in the boundless, high, incredible spiritual worlds, and even in the worlds of the divine, it still cannot compare to you. So why is the emphasis ba'olam hazeh in this world? So earlier, if you remember, he gave an explanation and he said that the olam hazeh means not that in this world there is no comparison to you, but rather what it means is that if we want to measure the distance of insignificance and compare that insignificance to the difference that there is from this world to the upper world, and to use that as a measurement, and say, just like we understand that our world is so small compared to the high world, in the same way the high world is nothing to Hashem, is insignificant. But we just explained, and that's what it's saying, Ein aroch l'cha ba'olam hazeh, that we can't use this measuring stick, this formula, because the distance between Hashem and worlds is much greater than the difference that there is between the worlds themselves. And that's the meaning of Ein aroch l'cha ba'olam hazeh. We can't use the olam hazeh as an example of insignificance. But over here, he emphasizes another point, that Ein aroch l'cha ba'olam hazeh means that it's, although the valuelessness is in all worlds, but there is something unique about this world that can teach us a lesson and a deeper understanding in this valuelessness, in the insignificance. Why is that? Because it's hard for us to imagine how something doesn't have a source, and that it like most things that we know, one thing evolves from the next. As we discussed, the emotions come from the intellect, the thoughts come from yesterday's class. Thoughts come from from emotion, and then speech comes from thought, and then action evolves from the speech, and so on and so forth. There is a whole series of evolution. So to find something that is completely and utterly detached, so to speak, from its source, it doesn't exist at all in its source. And if the source would stop making it, it's not like it would be, the energy of it would be included in the source. It would just be obliterated completely. We don't really seem to have examples of that. Because when we create things in this world, we never create something from nothing. This only applies to a creation of something from nothing. So when everything that we fashion, it's, for example, if you made a bowl or a wooden spoon or a wooden bowl, so the wooden bowl and the wooden spoon, it can trace its roots into the tree. And if you have a good imagination, you can see the bowl literally as part of the tree. Before you separated and cut out this wood and chopped the wood off and then carved out this particular bowl, but the potential was there in the tree because the wood was part of the tree. And the same is everything we produce. It's something from something. So you can. So where do we find in it something to use in an example and as a metaphor? So the metaphor would be, now we're going to say the opposite, that Olam Hazeh is going to be the example and the demo, we might say, the demo in which we can understand Ein Aroch Lecha. Why? Because Yashlaima, we can say Sheba Olam Hazeh, because in this world Nira, it is apparent, V'nigla, and it is revealed. Eich she'ein aroch, how? What does it mean when we say that ein aroch, there is no erech, there is no value? Why? Shaharei etzem agashmi, because the essence of the material, hu b'derech ein aroch, is in a manner of inconsequential and insignificant and incomparable. She'i avsheli esesavas agashmi b'derech erech, because material, physical substance would never come forth in a manner of evolution. And therefore, so therefore, it's only in this world that we can really gain understanding how the higher world is also utterly inconsequential and insignificant to its source. What is he saying? Saying like this. We spoke earlier how there is an evolution, and everything in our world exists in the higher worlds, but in a more elevated and therefore more powerful state. So remember when we spoke how everything in this world exists in the higher world and then even in the higher world. So if we were to see a tulip in the world of Atzilus, it would be far more impressive than a tulip in this world. Because the tulip in this world is the evolution of the tulip through a long, long chain of diminishments. Because whenever something is dropping into a lower world, means it's becoming more diminished and less of a lower form of existence. So the higher you go, the more richer everything is. So you think about how rich everything in this world is in the world of Atzilus. It's wow. It's unbelievable. Now, so that's the series, all right? So things evolve one from the next. Well, and we would say that what's the final station? What's the final manifestation of all these creatures and beings? Everything is that they finally come down and become a material substance. So the concept, like we discussed, of a lion, the concept of a rooster that we discussed in earlier classes, the concept of water, which is kindness. So when the water finally makes its way into, when kindness finally makes its way into a physical substance, here we are, it's water. So in that sense, the water is the last link of a chain. The fire is also the last link of a chain, because it doesn't go lower than this, but this is its lowest manifestation. Discipline, judgment, severity, strength is manifests. Gevura manifests as fire, and kindness manifests as water. But he's saying something very powerful and very important, and that is, we can extend this chain from the supernal kindness, from the divine kindness, into created kindness, and we can extend this chain, kindness after kindness after kindness, the kindness becoming more diluted and more diminished and more defined as it comes lower and lower. Its definitions will become more pronounced as you go lower and lower. But you can extend this chain of evolution forever and ever, and it will never turn into something physical. And the reason for that is that physical matter is something absolutely new. Physical matter does not pre-exist. In other words, the qualities of water, the content of water, that water is refreshing, and that water is life-giving, and that water is clear, and that water flows from a high place to a low place. All these features of the water are ideas and concepts that can be applied to a spiritual force. But the physical substance of the water, that we can touch it and weigh it in physical weight and touch it, and that the water has a material to it, matter does not just evolve from spirit. Spirit does not evolve. There's no evolution from spirit to matter. The spirit can continue going down, 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 down. It will never turn into something tangible. In order for the physicality of something tangible to come into existence, God does his magic. What's his magic? He produces something from nothing. And that's the physical matter of the water. So the brute physicality of something is a complete new entity. It's something that we have to wrap our minds around. The evolution of kindness, of water, through all the worlds is in a matter of cause and effect, in a matter of ilavi olol, in a matter of a chain-like connection, one after the other, till we get to the final stage. To produce something, that concept into physical matter, the physicality of it is nothing other than God's omnipotent power to produce something absolutely new. You cannot say that spirit gives birth to physicality. It would be like saying, imagine if we have a concept. Imagine if we have an abstract concept of math, and you try to bring the concept down. It's possible to bring a concept down, simplify it, make it more simple and more simple. So something's a deep idea, you can simplify it and simplify it and simplify it and give examples and metaphors and lower and lower. And therefore explain the idea even to simple people and then eventually even to a little child. But can you turn the substance of the idea, a spiritual concept, into, you're giving one example, another example, and at a certain point it turns into an object that you can pick up. In other words, imagine taking ideas and it evolves into an object. Now, let's understand something. If I want to do, if I want to illustrate an idea, for example, that 2 + 2 is 4, I can take the 2 and dress it into something physical. I can take 2 apples and another 2 apples and say, how many apples do we have? We have 4 apples. But that does not mean that 2 + 2, that the spiritual idea evolved into a physical object. I am taking physical objects that exist already. That means I have to find apples that are already in existence. But if I was in a world where there were no physicality at all, and I'm trying to bring down this concept that 2 + 2 is 4, and I want to thicken it and bring it down into, and say I'm going to lower it and lower it and lower it, and I'm going to lower it so many times till it's going to take on spatial features. It's going to have a space in the physical world. It's going to become something that's impossible. It's not going to happen, because to create physicality, that's yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. And therefore, the last stage of creation, from the spiritual to the physical, is not in a way of evolution. So when we're looking at the matter of the world, anything material, so they're all spiritual concepts that gets translated in the matter, but the matter itself, God needed to create from ex nihilo, absolute nothingness, into something. And therefore, physicality can serve as the example of something that is ein aroch, that doesn't have any significance to the source, because when the effect exists within the source prior to its creation, prior to its presence, then, as we said in yesterday's class, you can't call it nothing, because the source incorporates it, the source has it. But if you're saying that this doesn't exist, physical matter doesn't exist at all in the spiritual world. It's something totally new that's being brought out. For that reason, so put it this way, spiritual beings who never saw matter, angels in heaven and spiritual beings who never saw matter, they do not have a good example to appreciate and to understand something from nothing. Because they live in a world where everything is just pure evolution. Everything evolves from a higher level. Nothing is new. They don't have anything really original. So they really have to use their imagination to understand that even though there is this long chain of evolution where things evolve one from the other, but to God Himself, the highest world is something from nothing. It doesn't exist. They have to imagine that, but they don't have really something to use as an example. We who live in the physical world, who see physicality, and when we understand the nature of the physical versus the spiritual, then we can really and really appreciate the concept and the idea that ein aroch lecha, that there is something that has no value and is utterly insignificant because it doesn't exist. The source produces it, but it produces something that doesn't exist in the source at all. And therefore, it is really nothing, utterly nothing, because it doesn't have a piece of the source in it. It is completely dependent on the source. It has no existence at all without the source willing it into being, but it's not part of the source. For that, it is ein aroch. And that's why we say ein aroch. So let's put it this way, based on what we're learning over here in the Maayor, and the Tzemach Tzedek illustrates this very strongly in the Sefer, if I remember correctly, in Derech Mitzvah and Sherish Mitzvah Tefillah, that there are 2 points in the evolution of worlds. There are 2 primary points of yesh me'ayin, of something from nothing, where God takes a quantum leap and creates something from nothing, which means a stage that is utterly insignificant. And what is that? When Hashem produces the world of Atzilus, from Keser, from the infinite crown light, from the infinite light that is above Atzilus, to produce Atzilus, which is a world already, so that a world which has definitions from a non-defined and non-specified and a simple energy that's beyond all definitions, to bring about these definitions of kindness, all the spheros and attributes and whatever, from what is from before that, that is yesh me'ayin, something from nothing. And then comes a chain-like progression where that something that was created evolves through a whole series of evolutions, lower and lower and lower, to bring about many worlds. Now, I'm just going to say, just parenthetically, the leap from Atzilus to Bria is also, to a certain extent, from the first world to the second world is also something new, but I'm not getting into it right now, because that over there is also a going from the realm of the divine to creation. But that leap is not as severe and as great and as absolute like the difference between the Or Ein Sof and Atzilus. But the next time, when we have an absolute break from an evolution, from a chain-like evolution experience, and something utterly new is created, is when from the world of Yetzirah, which is the world higher than this world, but it's still a world of spirit, a material world emerges. And that's not that the spiritual world of Yetzirah gave birth to this world. It's not a birthing experience, because in the belly of Yetzirah does not exist matter. Matter is something totally innovative. And here God Himself has to get involved and produce the matter of the physical world. So, and that's the idea that he's explaining over here. So now, let's read it. So he says, I'll read again what we learned. What does it mean there's no erech to you in this world? We can say that in this physical world, here is apparent, and we can see what does it really mean when we say no comparison? Because the essence of the physical is in a manner of ein aroch, where it doesn't have any erech. any comparison. Because it would never produce, it would never come about the coming into being of the material, b'derech erech, in a way of evolution. When we see something material, we are forced to say, Maayon. It came into existence from utter nothingness, in a matter where there is no comparison, which means it doesn't exist even in a subtle way in its source. And that's the reason why dafka, which means precisely in our world, Novin, we will understand. This will give us a demo to understand how Atzilus, which is the highest world, is also coming from God in a manner of something utterly new. Because it's also a world, and God is not a world. And his coming into being, and its coming into existence, is in a manner of something from nothing. The Nimtza comes out. The Olam Atzilus gam came be'ein aroch, comes out in Atzilus, is also in a state of inconsequential and insignificant. The Oid Yoiser, and even more than. So the question is, which one is more? The creating the physical is more than Atzilus, or the creating of Atzilus? I'm going to understand what he means, the Oid Yoiser over here. Okay, I need to still think about that. Let's continue. Kitzer. So now he does a kitzer. What's the kitzer? He's now, you have to keep, in Yiddish you say, medaf halten cup, you have to keep your head. In this Maamor, you have to really keep your head. Yeah. It's almost like you can't put your head into anything in between these classes. You have to keep your head very, very unengaged all the rest of the day, so that you can leave your head plugged in to what we've learned. Because if we tune in and we're disconnected, then it's very hard to keep the streamline of what's going on over here. So in the chapter 7, he starts to deal with what seems to be the contradiction that there is regarding Atzilus. Is Atzilus a revelation of something that existed already, which is implied in the name of Atzilus, Atzilus means to emanate, but emanation doesn't mean to create. Emanation means to bring forth something that was already. But on the other hand, we said that Atzilus is the most something from nothing. That's what he's going to summarize over here. Ubira Inyan, let's see what he says in the Kitzer. Again, the summary. Ubira Inyan in Atzilus subchanas Gilui Halam. Atzilus is considered the revelation of something that was concealed. She'eino yischachas davar. It's not something new. But nevertheless, Atzilus be'ein aroch. Here, it seems like there was a word that was mistakenly put in. It says Atzilus be'ein ein aroch. So in the bottom, in the newer version, it says that it probably means just be'ein aroch. That Atzilus is be'ein aroch legaba matzel. To God, to the emanator, Atzilus, which is the world of emanation, is considered utterly incomparable to the emanator. And more, he resolved the question. More than the I'm not sure, no. Because we can say that what he means is more than what the difference between the content of Asiya to the content of Atzilus, and he doesn't mean more than the physical matter of Asiya. Okay. So, I'm sorry. It's just, I'm still bothered by the last word that he said, v'oid yoser. So, I thought I have a way of, that is, it's implying it over here, but not necessarily. Okay, so let's leave that out. Dismiss my own distraction now, and let me just, let's stick to what he says. And more than the difference, than the lower world to Atzilus, than the evolution, the separation between the worlds, as we discussed earlier, that after everything is said and done, they're both worlds, and they evolve one from the other. Asiya evolves from Yetzirah, and Yetzirah evolves from Bria, and Bria evolves from Atzilus. And notwithstanding the fact that we said Asiya does not evolve, Asiya is a new thing, that's the material of Asiya. But the content of Asiya, the meaning and the ideas the idea of every creature and every being, not its matter, is an evolution from a higher world. And even though in Asiya it is so minute compared to the very same idea as it is in Yetzirah, and Yetzirah is minute and hardly anything compared to Bria, and Bria is nothing compared to Atzilus, but yet there is a comparison. There is still a connection. Because the difference, because Asiya and Atzilus, they're both worlds. This is a lower world, it's a higher world. In which we say that the lower one is included in the upper world. And therefore, that's why when the way the lower world feels insignificant to the higher world is not utter, not complete. Why? Because even if the utter world will pull out, the lower world will not disappear, like we discussed in yesterday, the day before yesterday. It will its earlier state of existence, which is its more limited form, is going to be canceled, and it's going to go into a higher state of existence, like we discussed earlier. But the Atzilus is called Ein Aroch to Orein Sof. Why? It's not to be found at all in its source. And that's why we say that in our world we have, that's the last point we learned today, that in our world we're able to see it. How there's no comparison. Why? Because in our world it is apparent and we can see. We can see it clearly. And from here we can deduce. That so it is in our world we get to see a substance that doesn't have a source, or that is produced in a manner of something new, and that serves as an example and as a demo for the concept of worlds in general compared to God. So what does that leave us? That leaves us with a question. So then what is Atzilus? And that's what he's going to ask over here in the beginning of chapter 8. We're starting chapter 8, just the first tiny paragraph. But it's not understood. Since Atzilus is called Va'atzalti. Va'atzalti means, like what we learned by Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moses needed to just emanate his energies onto the elders. But it wasn't something new, because Moshe didn't produce a new form of prophet. They were just prophesizing with Moshe's prophecy, but in a manner that's closer to the Jewish people, like we discussed about the meat, that their type of energy was closer to the people. That really existed as a potential in Moshe, but it wasn't actualized only in their souls. So that's called Vatzalti. It's a revelation of what is concealed. So this is not something new. And like the Sefer HaMa'areches, which is a Kabbalistic Sefer, an ancient Kabbalistic Sefer, who made the Ma'areches? I don't remember. Maybe Rabbi, not sure. I'll check it up. In any case, one of the great Kabbalists, and he writes regarding Atzilus, that when we're dealing with the world of Atzilus, nothing new comes about. It's just a revelation of something that pre-existed in the Matzel, in the emanator. The hidden power that was there was revealed. And that which was sealed off and closed. From potential into actualization. And then and therefore the question is, how can we now justify the other idea that we say how Atzilus is even more Ein Aroch to God than the difference between Atzilus and all the worlds? Atzilus is an absolute newness. These two things seem to contradict each other. The answer he's going to present, Be'ez Hashem, in tomorrow's class, is he's going to attempt first to make a more simpler answer, and that is that we have to differentiate between the lights of Atzilus, the energy, and the vessels. The vessels are something totally new. The lights are an emanation. He's going to present that answer to the end of this chapter, and then further on, somewhere I think in the next Maayor, is where he's going to refute this answer, and he's going to seek to go much deeper. Okay, everyone? May we see Mashiach today.